Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly interview show where top chess players, authors, content creators, and accomplished amateurs discuss their careers and share stories and chess improvement tips. Perpetual Chess is a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and we'd like to give special thanks to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. For more information about the show, you can go to perpetualchesspod.com. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. This is an unplanned breaking news edition. Listeners, you've probably heard the seismic, if not shocking news from the chess world that Magnus Carlsen has made it official that he will not be defending his world championship title. We are joined by a well-known and well-connected Norwegian Chess24 reporter. He's also an avid chess player, a photographer, a dad. He's been on the show before. But today we've got important news to discuss. So without further ado, let's welcome Tarjei Svensen back to the show. Welcome, Tarjei.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, and interesting times to be rejoining here. We're recording on International Chess Day, July 20th, the day the news broke. But Tarjei, I understand that you reported a couple of days ago that close sources to Magnus had said that there's zero chance that he would defend the title under its current conditions. And then you had mentioned to me right before we hit record that you knew the story would be breaking imminently.
Yeah, I did write the story a couple of days ago, speaking to two sources close to Magnus, that basically that there was zero chance that he would play the match without format changes. But I didn't really know the fact that this was going to be announced within a couple of days later. To me, it seems like people at that point still believed that there was a chance that Magnus would play regardless. So that story, I think, kind of changed that a bit.
Yeah, I agree. You know, as a sports fan and one who tries to be informed, when something like that, a well-sourced story comes out, I always try to ask myself, like, who might have the source been and what might have their motivation been? And obviously, you're in a delicate situation to speak on this as the reporter. And I'm not asking you who your sources are, but I'm just saying my perspective as an informed chess fan, as I thought about it, was, well, they're trying to establish expectations here. They feel like the story's gotten away from them a little bit, and they want people to be ready for what's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was, of course, as a reporter, I knew that this was going to break today on International Chess Day, and that is something that I didn't expect, because as I've been writing on Twitter that I kind of expected this to take a couple of months, because Magnus didn't really have any obligation to announce this today. There was like a sort of like a deadline set, but it was never a real deadline that he needed to follow. But for the chess world, I guess it's a good thing that he announced this, so we can move on and focus on the upcoming World Championship match. We know who is going to play.
Yeah, of course, we know now that Jan Nepomniachtchi will be the air quotes defender against the challenger air quotes Ding Liren. And yeah, I had the same reaction once I had time to think about it. Of course, as a chess fan, I've mentioned before on the podcast, I'm disappointed that Magnus won't defend his title. Certainly, it's his right. I'm not judging in any way. And, you know, you only live once. You've got to do what makes you happy. But nonetheless, the World Championship won't be the same without him.
No, that's clear. It's for as a chess fan, as regardless if you support Magnus or if you're rooting for him or anyone else, it's sad, of course. It's such a huge he's such a huge player in chess history. He's been dominating for 10 years, and not to have him play World Championship matches it will be quite different, obviously. But at the same time, he has been very consistent in what he has been saying for a long time, for several years. So for people who were following for people who have been following his statements and his interviews, I don't think it should come as a surprise, because he's saying his opinion. He's very frank and says exactly what he feels. So for me, it's this was kind of expected. I just didn't expect it to come now, and I expected it to take a little bit more time. As I said.
Yeah, better to know now so that we can all move forward. And yeah, Tarjei, again, you've been out in front of this story. You've been trying to manage people's expectations online. And one thing I've noted, I've generally taken him at his word, although I will admit in recent months, especially in light of what was reported about the meeting with FIDE, I started to get slightly more optimistic that maybe an agreement would be reached. But overall, over the past months, as you talk to people closer to Magnus, such as they talk about on the Chicken Chess Club, and when I spoke with Grandmaster Jonathan Tisdall, another Norwegian chess reporter, Norwegian by way of America, and of course your own work, that led me to predominantly be prepared for the worst. And just to cover the news, again, listeners probably have read an article or two about it, but when the news broke, Magnus announced it on his new podcast called The Magnus Effect, which will be sponsored by Unibet. And I listened to the first episode. It's going to be a unique blend of, it sounds like sports talk, betting talk, and maybe some chess talk, at least when he's retiring. But just to read what Magnus said, he said, ultimately, the conclusion stands, one that I'm pretty comfortable with, one that I've thought about for a long time now. I would say more than a year, probably a year and a half almost, since long before the last match. And I've spoken to people in my team. I've spoken to FIDE. I spoke to Jan as well. And the conclusion is, yeah, it's simple, that I'm not motivated to play another match. I simply don't feel that I have a lot to gain. I don't particularly like it. And although I'm sure a match would be interesting for historical reasons and all of that, I don't have any inclination to play and simply will not play the match. So yeah, pretty unequivocal. And Tarjei, you're joining me from Colombia, of course, but you have your finger on the pulse of Norwegian chess fandom, I'm sure. So what do you think the reaction is like back home for you?
I think perhaps Norwegian chess fans are a little bit less surprised than the international chess community. It feels like the international chess community still expected Magnus to play, but I feel like the Norwegian chess community know a little bit more about how much he was against playing another match. He has been pretty vocal, and he's much more open in Norwegian interviews. So I think for the general Norwegian chess fan, I think there mostly now is disappointment for one reason, because the broadcasts from the World Championship matches are so immensely popular in Norway, and that's going to end now. There is not going to be any more chess broadcasts. Well, there is going to be chess broadcasts, but kind of like the highlight is that the World Championship match itself, going over weeks, and they have been watched by 1 million Norwegians. We're talking about a country with 5 million. So I think there's a huge disappointment that's going to end, even though we will still see broadcasts from the World Rapid and Blitz, and occasionally some other events as well. But that will be a huge that will be missed in Norway, I think.
Yeah, just a staggering percentage of the population to be tuned into an event like that. And yeah, he's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tarjei, but he's one of the biggest sports stars in Norway, correct?
Yes, well, the last few years, there are some new sports star emerging, like Erling Braut Haaland is probably the biggest star now, the footballer who just signed from Manchester City. And then you have the athlete 1500 meters Jakob Ingebrigtsen, and you have Karsten Warholm 400 meters hurdles. But Magnus is clearly up there still, but it's not going to be the same, obviously, without the World Championship matches. But at least he's going to keep playing. This is not like a retirement, and he still has goals to chase. He can kind of like fully focus on trying to edge closer to the 2900 barrier, so to say. For a chess fan, for a Norwegian chess fan, that could be something worth to follow, I guess.
Yeah, it would be nice if people tune in, but that's like such a slog. And Magnus himself has said he might be an underdog to achieve it. So
Yeah.
compared to the immediacy and the understandability of a world championship match.
Yeah, but it kind of shows his competitiveness. He's always striving for improving and for breaking new records. Even though he's kind of like fed up with the world championship matches, he can still try to win even more tournaments and improve his rating. He's capable of that. He just has to. He can still improve, as you say. He's his biggest critic. It's himself.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and for all the adult improvers listening, he had a quote along those lines that I found noteworthy, which was basically he felt like since he started the World Championship cycle, he felt like he'd been kind of pushed away from being able to pursue chess improvement because he'd been so focused on openings for these matches in particular. So it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective that studying on these very granular lines in like the Petrovs and the Queen's Gambit declines and the Berlins, these openings that are very likely, as I discussed with Christoph Zalecki, to appear at the top level, but they don't give you like a broader, they don't work to give you like a full-scale broader understanding of chess. So it was interesting that he credited, you would think playing for the World Championship would be great for your chess, but he it sounds like he wasn't so sure.
Yeah, well, it also takes away a lot of time from playing other tournaments. Like he doesn't enjoy all of this preparation, and this is time that he could have used to play other tournaments that he enjoys much more. Another factor is actually like, even though you sometimes see him have this win the tournaments, and he's like, yeah, he wins the tournaments, but at some point you feel like, yeah, it was a decent event, but there is something missing. He can still do better. There's always this feeling that when he wins the tournament, he can improve and he can do better, and that shows how far he can reach, and that he still has like another level, perhaps, to get back to where he was in 2019.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, and just to hear, to share rather, a few other prominent people's reactions. Bear with me, Tarjei. I'm going to read a few quotes from FIDE President Dvorkovich. He released a statement which said, Magnus Carlsen deserves nothing but respect from FIDE and from the whole chess community in whatever decision he makes regarding his career. Only a handful of people in history can understand and assess the tremendous toll that it takes playing 5 matches for the title. He goes on to say his decision not to defend his title is undoubtedly a disappointment for the fans and bad news for the spectacle. It leaves a big void, but chess is stronger now than ever, in part thanks to Magnus and the World Championship match, one of the longest and most respected traditions in the world of sports, will go on. Jan Nepomniachtchi, who, as we mentioned at the top, Magnus checked in with before the announcement, said, personally for me, it was quite disappointing and quite sad. Maybe he felt himself a hostage of the whole situation. Kasparov had a tweet where he said, staying on top is harder than getting to the top because you're competing against the feeling that you've achieved your life's goal already. Staying motivated after the Chess Olympus is like climbing Mount Everest a second time or a sixth. Humans need purpose. And 2 more quotes. MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, said, it's a pity, of course, but that the world number 1 and the world champion for 10 years is not a part of the cycle anymore. And he also said, I think the format is not adapted to our times. I thought there were probably better ways of deciding the world championship. It was maybe a time for a change, and maybe this move by Magnus will be a catalyst. And then last but not least, Ding Liren himself, who you spoke with, Tarjei. So you spoke with today, we should say. So you shared a picture in the article you wrote for Chess24. He looked to be on top of the world, despite the fact that he revealed he had been recovering from COVID. Tell us more about it, Tarjei.
Yeah, I actually scheduled this meeting yesterday, and that was the time when this wasn't publicly known. I don't think Ding knew that as well. So we basically scheduled this meeting before it was official, and we didn't say anything about what it was about. But he's a top guy, very nice guy, and I met him at. He's in Barcelona, and whenever I talked to him, he had just received the message, like literally, I think like 15, 20 minutes before I talked to him. So he was, how do you say it, over the moon, basically. Like
Yeah.
he couldn't keep a straight face. He was very happy, smiling, saying he needed to calm down a bit. Of course, this for him, he made it clear this is a huge opportunity for him and a big chance, and many people consider him the favorite to win the match. He's currently world number 2, and although he perhaps hasn't been that clear a favorite compared to the rest if you kind of remove Magnus. But we all know what he's capable at his very best. He's an incredibly strong player, and I'm sure he will also have, as he confirmed to me, that he will have a lot of support from the Chinese community, and he also thought that there was a chance that this is a match that could be hosted in China.
Yeah, I want to pick up that thread in a minute. Yeah, and he also, of course, mentioned that this would be a motivator for him to work harder on his chess, and he mentioned his English, which is not bad for the record. Neither is his chess.
No.
But on the chess front, I know that some people have mentioned, like some top players, that his repertoire is not as broad as other top players, and he highlighted that himself.
Yeah. He said he still needs to improve. He's an extremely humble guy, of course. Talking about the world number 2, he's well about 2,800, and of course that's true. He can still improve, and he needs to improve if he's going to be playing a world championship match. And I do think he will get a lot of support from the Chinese chess community. So it will be exciting, of course.
Tarjei, as you were saying a minute ago, Ding mentioned the possibility of China hosting. And when I saw that, my reaction, I have to admit, was kind of like, well, I hope so, because it feels like there won't be as many hosts lined up, especially with the possibility, obviously strong possibility, of a Russian competitor, given the geopolitical situation, despite Nepo's kind of he's not directly implicated, obviously, in this war, but some people rightfully argue that there shouldn't be a Russian challenger at this time, so it could deter sponsors. So do you think that Ding is on firm ground there, suggesting there could be a match in China?
I do think so. I wouldn't call myself an expert. Like, this would be purely speculation from my end, but a match between a Russian and a Chinese, I would be surprised if there are like too many different markets for raising millions for such a match, but China should definitely be a possibility. And when I spoke to Arkady Borkovich about this, he came to Bogota, and I asked him specifically about this. How would it be to have a world championship match without Magnus Carlsen? And he insists that these markets will kind of boom if a player from that region will win. I asked him whether there have been interest from other, and he said he didn't mention any places, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are interest from China that could host this, and China hosted the Women's World Championship match, at least half of it, in 2020 between Yu Wenjun and Alexandra Goryashkina. So it will be interesting to see. Also, it will be interesting to see if what the prize fund will be. How having a match without the biggest star of the game the last 10 years, how that will affect the prize fund.
Yeah, and of course we'll be following this stuff over the coming months. Now that this news has dropped, I expect the story to unfold a bit more slowly. And, I do think it's a very compelling matchup. Obviously, of course, I'd love to see Magnus in it. And I've said and stand by, it may, to me, not feel like a world championship. But Grandmaster Peter Wells was on Twitter pointing out, and Nigel Davies, that there have been many times in history where the best player is not the world champion, so this will be another. But Tarjei, on the topic of what Dvorkovich told you, one thing that I found curious, and part of the reason I got a little misled about maybe the possibility of Magnus defending his title was, Emil Satovsky and his description of their meeting had been slightly more constructive than the way Magnus described it. Satovsky had said with a smile when he was interviewed with chess.com during the candidates that it was a constructive conversation, and he sounded optimistic, like they might be able to come to terms. And now in Magnus's both in the story that you reported a couple days ago and today, it sounds like Magnus told them then that there was no match, at least according to Magnus. So how do you parse this, Tarjei?
Yeah, I think this is kind of like politics. I think there is an election coming up, and I think they, as you're saying, I think they made it sound like the chances are a little bit higher than they actually were. From what I hear, there were never any negotiations going on. It was always clear that Magnus wasn't going to play this match, even if they had a meeting. They made it sound like, even if you, especially if you read the Alpine report, that kind of made chess fans hope that there was a chance, but that report proved to be quite inaccurate. They had sources that claimed that they were kind of hopeful that he would play if there were certain format changes. From what I hear, there were absolutely no negotiations. Magnus never made any demands, and he had already made up his mind a long time ago, with the exception if Firusha, probably, I think there could be another player who would kind of like made him think a little bit or consider it for a little bit longer. But in the end, it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to play this match.
Yeah, it's all come to light now.
Yeah.
And of course, even people like Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura have been on the record that they basically thought Magnus was bluffing. And Hikaru talked about it on his stream today, which you can also find on his YouTube channel. And, there's so many what ifs that I don't want to speculate too wildly or for too long. But there does seem, you tweeted that you didn't think, and obviously, again, you're close to the situation, you didn't think it necessarily would have made a difference if it were Hikaru, who, of course, was very close to being the next in line if he had held his last game against Ding Liren. You didn't think it would have made a difference if it was Hikaru lined up to play Nepo? You still think Magnus would have made the same decision?
Yeah, definitely. I don't agree with Hikaru that if Hikaru had finished second, that then Magnus would decide to play Nepo. That was the impression I got from his take, and I think he has. If you watch the podcast, you see how clear he was. If you listen to the podcast and you see how clear he has been on the lack of motivation, and you compare that with his previous statements, I just cannot imagine that it would have made a difference at all. I'm still a bit surprised. I have to say again, I'm surprised that all of the top players, they should know how frank Magnus is with all his statements and all the interviews, and every time he's been saying the same thing, that he lacks motivation. So they still kept believing that he was bluffing. They were serious because I guess they don't fully quite understand how you can turn down the biggest opportunity, the biggest chance that you have as a chess player.
Yeah, I do think that's what it is. And I think that obviously you've interacted with a lot of chess fans online, and you pointed to a prior tweet where you'd invited conversations about the likelihood that Magnus would defend his title, and there were just so many replies.
Yeah.
As I said, I've not judged the situation perfectly at times, so I'm not judging anyone who is fooled. I do think that what you allude to, it's just we think of it in our shoes, but not in Magnus.
I have to say, like, it's not like I don't understand people. Like, I do understand people as well. It's not like I can understand people are surprised. But for like to turn down a chance like that, but at the same time, like if you paid a little bit attention to the things you have been saying, that it shouldn't really come as a big surprise.
Yeah, and just one or two more questions, Tarjei. So of course there have been various discussions of format. If FIDE were to change the format wholesale, which I know a lot of people, again, I understand a lot of people are against it, and I understand that a lot of people have said if you incorporate more Blitz and Rapid, you're just turning it into the World Rapid and Blitz, or the World Cup format or something like that. Now, I think there's room for differing formats, but I did want to, I understand people's critiques. But if they were to drastically change the format, how likely do you think Magnus would be to reemerge, which he didn't rule out, by the way, in his statement generally?
Yeah, I think the only chance for him to return if there is a considerably different format. He's not going to return if you have the same format that he has been criticizing for a long time. I have to say that over the years, ever since he was like a teenager, he has been criticizing or been suggesting other formats. And he hasn't been entirely consistent with his suggestions. Now, I don't really have any strong preference for either format. Like I'm not a big supporter for the format that he suggested, but I do think that the chessworld should be more open to changes and to kind of like modernize the format, and you can also include some rapid and even blitz to determine who is not only the best player but the most complete player. But at the same time, of course, I understand that it is, after all, a classical World Championship. So the classical part should be the most important part of such a match. But I can imagine that now this is a huge loss for FIDE to be without the biggest star of the game. So like Varshela Graf said today, it's possible that there won't be any changes for this cycle, but I can imagine that they will be going through a serious process in order to look for a better format, perhaps a format that can tempt Carlsen to return in the future.
Yeah, MVL, I thought, was eloquent in that short statement. And as has been said before on this podcast, Tarjei and I were chess journalists, but also chess fans, and everyone listening is a chess fan. But ultimately, what really matters is what the top players think. So to hear someone like MVL weigh in is valuable. Yeah. But Hikaru, on the other hand, despite his tremendous acumen at faster formats, seems to not be an advocate of big change. So it's important to get those 20, 25 people whose opinions really matter and find out what they think.
I think the current format has its ups and downs. I don't think there are many fans who enjoy this perhaps dry, boring draws or with long prepped lines that's not that entertaining for fans. So there has to be a way to kind of modernize, while at the same time keeping some tradition and try to find the middle way, one format that could perhaps attract new fans into the game.
Yeah. Well, Tarjei, there's going to be plenty of time to react. We always enjoy your writing on Chess24, and obviously Tarjei is a must follow on Twitter for any serious chess fan. Do you have anything to add before we say our goodbyes on this huge day in chess history, this landmark day?
Well, there's a lot of chess to follow. Still, there are plenty of events to follow. Like we have the Zagreb event that is a lot of fun to follow. Rapid and Blitz, which is always entertaining, and then you have the Chess Olympiad coming up in just 1.5 weeks, I think. It's going to be super fun with Carlsen in action and most of the top players. Perhaps not very exciting to follow who is going to win the team event. USA is the huge favorite, and then you'll have of course you have the Chess24 online events, the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour with the FTX Crypto Cup in Miami. And there is also one event that hasn't really been mentioned much that is going to be taking place in October, which is the Fisher Random World Championship that is taking place in Iceland, and Carlsen is playing, and I believe also Wesley So has been confirmed. And I think that's going to be a cool event to follow. So even without Carlsen in the next World Championship match, we're going to be seeing a lot of great chess from the world champion and in general from all the top players.
Yeah, it was impressive to hear how busy Magnus's upcoming chess schedule is. So it is good. It is reassuring, as you say, that he and the chess world will go on. But yeah, certainly a memorable day. And before we say our goodbyes, just a quick note for listeners. Obviously, we'll be talking about this more in future weeks and months here on the podcast, but we will be getting back to sort of regular programming. So next week we won't be talking about it, although we do have a bonus pod with FIDE presidential candidate Barish Politz coming soon, and more stuff like that. But generally, as the news cycle moves slower, we will have less world championship stuff to react to. But Tarjei, thank you for making yourself available on short notice. I know it's probably been a pretty busy day for you of recent.
Thanks, Ben. It's always great to be on your show. Appreciate your work.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. Big shout out to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank the Blue Wire Podcast Network, with whom we are proud to be affiliated. Be sure to follow us on social media, Beneficial1 on Twitter, at Perpetual Chess on Instagram, or you can join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can email me, ben@perpetualchesspod.com. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to give major thanks to the Perpetual Chess Patreon and PayPal supporters. Those who choose to join that community based on their level of support can do things like submit questions for guests of the show, have access to live Zoom Q&A lectures with grandmasters who often have appeared on the show, going over chess games, answering questions, stuff like that. And you can even get access to ad-free Perpetual Chess if that's your preference. So, but most of all, thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you all on the next episode.